The video today is going to talk about the structure of a Django project. This is probably, certainly at least at the beginning of the semester, the most important video you will see. The reason for that is that students have a lot of trouble with Django and its structure. Where to put things, which folder are we talking about? The book that we're using for this class is very good, and it has a convention that I'm going to be following in the class. It will make things a lot easier for you to find as you work over the course of the semester. It is very important you follow this convention. If you go off on your own and you change the names and you don't follow the convention I'm going to show you, you'll have a lot of confusion and it could really affect your projects. What you see on the screen here is an example project on the left. So let's assume you have a company and you want to create a Django-based website. The structure might look something like this. First of all, you'll have a folder that contains all of the projects. As a web developer, you might be working on a variety of different projects, not just ones that have been fully implemented, but you might have some examples and some things that you're playing around with. But now let's talk about the specific project you're working on right now, and I'm going to call this My Company. So the My Company project are the ones that you're currently working on, and it could be a variety of different projects. Within that, and this folder, by the way, can be renamed. So over here, if you look on the right side, I walk through each of these folders. So the outer, the My Company project folder acts as a container for the entire project. That is your company's website. The outer folder here, this one containing all the projects, might be a variety of things that you're working on. Inside the project folder is what we call the root folder. The root folder is the root of this project that you're working on, the one that you're currently working on. And though this might seem to be redundant with the project folder, it's possible that you might have many different websites within your project. So that the root folder is the one that you're going to be working on now. We won't be having multiple projects, multiple roots in a project in our 350 class, but I'm doing this because it does follow the convention in the book and it will make it easier for you to replicate what the book is doing. This folder can also be renamed. The My Company _ root can be renamed. The My Company _ project can be renamed. Inside the root folder, then, you have the default app. In this case, it is called My Company. Now the My Company folder is the default app. You can think of this as the controller for the entire website. That is whatever is contained inside the root folder. So this is like your main brain. This is where all of the main controller for the entire site is located. You might have then a variety of different applications. So for example, here I have an e-commerce app, a payroll app. These might be two different pieces of functionality. The e-commerce app would have its own database that would store customer orders, for example. The payroll app would store the information about the employees and how much money they make and what they got paid. These are different applications. These are all part of My Company and the website, but there are different applications within that particular root folder. And then you also have a couple of files, manage.py and in this case db SQLite 3. Manage.py is a utility file. It is used to initiate most of the commands, most of the Django commands we're going to be using this semester. And the db.SQLite 3 is the database for your entire website. That is the My Company root website, and all of the database models and all of the data for your website will be stored there. Now that's an example, so let's bring this down to earth a little bit, what your folder structure would look like. For this class, your very outer folder, I want to use MISY 350, and you should create this on your desktop. I believe in one of the earlier videos I actually had you do that. Then we might have, for example, the first homework project. And we're going to call the outer folder for that homework project HW1 _ project. This is going to contain all of the elements of the HW1 or homework 1 project. Within HW1 project, then you're going to have an HW1 root, and that is going to store all of the information and all of the applications for the project. Although, again, this seems redundant, this is how your book does it, and I want to make sure to be consistent with your book. It'll make things a lot simpler. Remember, the project folder and the root folders can always be renamed, but the inner app here, HW1, cannot. It cannot be renamed, and that's very important. If you rename the inner app here, this HW1, it will break your website, okay? You can then just rename it back to HW1, but it will break your website. And you might have, for example, some other applications. So for example, we had the e-commerce and the payroll app. You might have some other apps in your HW1 project. And then of course you have your manage and your database. Later in the semester, you'll have other projects. So you'll have HW2, HW3, etc. They will all follow the same structure. Please remember that some app here is not really the name. This is just an example. In practice, of course, you will actually have probably a specific name that you use for that application in HW1. Now, there are some very important things to remember. Never use spaces in this class. That is for, the names of images, the names of files, the names of folders. If you think about it, whenever you type in a website address, it never contains a space. That's something to remember, and just get out of the habit of using spaces. The web was not created when spaces were commonly used, and websites do not like spaces. It's a good way to break your website. Don't use spaces in either files or folders. Stick with the naming conventions that I give you. Please do this. This is so critical. I can't emphasize this enough. It will help you understand things. So when I give you directions and I say, for example, put it in your project folder, you'll know what I'm talking about. If I say put it in your root folder, you'll know what I'm talking about. If I'm referring to the app folder, I'm referring to, in this case, HW1 or my company. That is very important. So if you follow the conventions, you'll never have any confusion as to where something goes. Remember that additional apps, for example, some app, the e-commerce app, the payroll app, may or may not be present in a particular project. It's not required that you have additional apps. The default app, that is HW1, for example, is all that is technically needed in a Django project. But your book does like to add apps to the project, so we may actually have a number of projects, a number of apps rather, in your project. And make sure you create, every time you create a project, make sure it conforms to the conventions in this video. It's worthwhile going back through this video every time you create a project. It'll save you a lot of trouble later. Virtual environments. We're using virtual environments. What that means is that this allows you to make sure that different applications don't conflict with other applications and different projects don't conflict with other projects. In your book on pages 19 through 20, the author uses an activate command specific to Python to activate the particular virtual environment. We are not doing that because we're using Anaconda. Anaconda handles a lot of these issues, and it's actually a lot easier to do in Anaconda, and I'm going to show that to you in just a minute. So instead, make sure you first enter Anaconda, choose the appropriate virtual environment, and then start VS Code from within that environment. When you're using the command line, which again I'm going to show you in just a minute, you will use the integrated terminal window. You'll see that in just a minute. I will demonstrate that. Make sure the correct environment is in parentheses, because if you don't do that, you will get errors. So let's go through an example project. I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to go into first Anaconda, and I encourage you to follow along with me here. Once you get into Anaconda, you want to make sure the first thing is to always choose the correct Django environment. I'm going to use 350, which is what you should have that set up from the previous video. And if you'll notice there, I have VS Code, so I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Now, in case you don't have this currently set up, I did not actually add MISY 350. If MISY 350 is currently in your workspace, then you don't need to do anything. But again, I'm going to show you how to do that. So go into File, Add Folder to Workspace. I'm going to go to my desktop, choose 350, and say Add. And again, that's just to make sure that you have that. You should see that. You won't have the projects, 2020 projects, 2021 projects, but this is one good way to actually make sure that you have 350 in your window. Once you do that, we're now going to add the project folder. So I'm going to say New Folder, and I'm going to say HW1 _ project. That's going to be my outer folder. Once I've done that, I'm going to right-click this, and I'm going to say Open an Integrated Terminal. This will allow us to actually do command line from within VS Code. Now down here, you'll notice that at the beginning here, it says Django development. That's because I have a variety of virtual environments installed. You probably do not. If yours says MISY 350 in parentheses, that's exactly what you should see. But you'll notice the command that was automatically executed to do that, conda activate Django development. I don't want that. I want actually MISY 350. So I'm going to type that 350. You do not need to do this if MISY 350 is already there. And you'll notice now I have activated that particular environment. If MISY 350 is not in parentheses at the very beginning, Django will not work because you installed it under that particular virtual environment. Okay, so let's create now. We're going to issue the Django command to create a new project. Django admin start project, and then we're going to say space HW1, and I'm going to hit return. Now, it doesn't look like anything happened, but if you look back up here now, you'll notice now my HW1 project folder now contains something. That is HW1. Actually, it contains two HW1s. What I want to do, though, first I'm going to close this terminal. And what I want to do is to conform to the convention. So I want to right-click this, and I'm going to make this the root folder. So I'm going to rename this _ root. Now you'll notice I'm using all lowercase. Please don't do that. The web is all lowercase. Don't use capital letters. Students love to use capital letters in their file names. Everything in your website, file names, folder names, should be lowercase. Again, that's not just my convention. That's the convention for the web. And again, you cannot rename this folder. This is the inner app folder, and we want to make sure that we don't rename that because it would actually break our application. Now, you'll notice that manage.py is actually in the HW1 root folder. So if I open that folder, you'll see that HW1 root contains HW1 and manage.py. So I'm going to right-click here and say Open an Integrated Terminal. And I can confirm what is in there. I'm going to, again, change my name to the MISY 350. You probably don't need to do this. It probably comes up automatically. And now that I have the right virtual environment, I can type ls, which is in Linux, which is what Macs are based in. It will tell me the contents, and then you can see the folders. If you're running Windows, you want to type in dir, and it will do the same thing. What I want to do is I want to activate my web server because I want to confirm that this is working. So I'm going to say python manage.py, and that is how you activate and use the utility file manage.py. And then I'm going to say run server. If everything works, I will get a message. And the message I get here, you'll notice that the server is actually running, but it gives me a red message here. This is not a warning sign. This is actually still working. It's fine. But when you create a Django project, there are certain migrations, things like the administrative function, the authorization function. There's a variety of things that are built into Django, and you have not actually activated those in the database. So hit Control-C, and on a Mac, it is Control-C on a Mac, and I believe it's also Control-C on a PC. And I can say, I can hit the up arrow, and that will give me the last command I entered. And then type in make migrations, all one word. What this does is it generates the file that's necessary for the migrations. Migrations are some kind of change that you're making to the database. That's taken care of. And now I can hit the up arrow again and use the up arrow a lot. It's a great way to actually do things very fast. Make migrations, then to migrate. And you'll notice a whole bunch of things happens that actually changes the physical database and adds a whole bunch of tables. Now our Django file, believe it or not, our Django project is pretty well done. I can hit up arrow, up arrow, up arrow, and it takes me back to run server. Run. Now you see that the red nasty message is gone, and you'll notice that the web server is running. I'm going to go now and start up Chrome. And by the way, it does give you the website right there. If I want to hit Command and then click, I can do that, and it will actually open up, and it will tell you that the install worked successfully. Congratulations. So this is actually how you create a Django project. Make sure you walk through this carefully, step by step, and you should be all set to go.